kind of logistical. Oh, now we're started. And so I just want to hand off briefly to our interpreter, who's going to give some instructions on how to listen. We have the option to listen in English or in Spanish.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Giovanna Wormsbecker, and I will be your Spanish interpreter during this meeting. In order to provide language access, this meeting will have simultaneous interpretation in Spanish. Please note that the translation globe will not appear until after I've read through all language instructions. If you're bilingual, you do not have to click anything. If you're not bilingual, you will have to select the language that you speak in order to hear the interpretation. If you're on a laptop or a desktop, you will see a globe at the bottom right of your screen. Select it and the icon that says interpretation, and then select English. If you're on an iPad or a similar device, then locate the three-dot menu on the upper right and select language interpretation, and then select English. When it's your turn to speak, please remember to be loud and clear and speak at a moderate pace, as the interpreter will be interpreting simultaneously into the other language. Buenas tardes a todos, me llamo Giovanna Wormsbecker y seré su intérprete en español durante esta reunión. Esta reunión contará con interpretación simultánea bidireccional en inglés y en español. El globo de traducción no va a aparecer hasta que se hayan leído las instrucciones en todos los idiomas. Si usted es bilingüe, no tiene que presionar nada. Si usted no es bilingüe, tendrá que elegir su idioma para escuchar la interpretación. Si está usando una computadora, verá un icono en la parte inferior de su pantalla a la derecha en forma de globo que dice interpretación. Haga clic ahí y seleccione español. Si está usando un iPad o teléfono, localice el menú de 3 puntos que aparece arriba a la derecha, haga clic en interpretación de idiomas y elija español. Cuando sea su turno de hablar, por favor recuerde hablar con voz fuerte y clara y a un paso moderado, ya que el intérprete estará interpretando simultáneamente al otro idioma. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Giovanna. So we just have a couple of other slides here. So as we move through the presentation, we do have the Q&A button available to you. So again, on the bottom of your screen or your tablet, use the Q&A at any time if you want to ask us a question or provide a comment. And we'll keep track of those throughout the meeting. And we're going to take a couple of stops along the way and at the end to answer all of your questions before tonight. So again, if you're using a computer, you use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll respond. Some questions we can respond directly in text, so we're going to keep track of those throughout the meeting. Thank you. All right, and then here's the instructions in Spanish. Same thing, use the Q&A button throughout. And hopefully the instructions are there. So great, I'm just going to introduce the team quickly. This again is for the city of Gilroy. Cindy McCormick is with us. She's the project manager and representative from community development. My name is Dan Weary. I'm the project manager for Michael Baker International. And our translator tonight is Giovanna Wormsbecker. And I also have a couple of associates from my office, Shannon Liska and Cameron Savoy, to assist us with running the meeting. So on to the good stuff. Okay, why we're meeting and what we're doing tonight. First of all, our goals for tonight's meeting are to cover a number of give it a quick overview of the housing element. We've been working on this for, I guess, over 6 months now. And we have had prior workshops on this. So I just wanted to start off by saying that there are prior recordings of prior workshops that are available on the city's website. So this one tonight is going to cover these items here. We're going to provide a review of the requirements for housing elements in general. That's going to be a lighter review than we did in our prior workshop where we went into more depth. Then we're going to cover a main component of each housing element, which is our regional housing needs allocation, RHNA, or otherwise known as RHNA. And I'll use the RHNA term throughout this presentation quite a bit. Third, we're going to talk about the site selection process, criteria and requirements, and we'll have some poll questions. And as part of this housing element, a key component is the identification of appropriate sites within the city that are available for housing development over the next 8 years. And then we'll cover some of the draft programs and some survey results. We've had another major component of the housing element, in addition to the sites, are the various actions and programs that the city will take to promote construction of housing, and it's housing for all income levels and all levels and stages of lifestyle. And then at the end, we'll have, again, an open Q&A period. I've got about 30 slides or so. The presentation will probably take 35, 45 minutes. That should leave plenty of time for the Q&As that we'll have throughout in the beginning of this workshop. We'll take a couple of breaks, and then we've got plenty of time at the end to answer any other questions that you have. So with that, I think we'll move on. So first, we want to know how many of you have attended or watched any of the recordings of the prior workshops from the city's website. And so we've got a poll question. If Aaron or Cameron, you can pop that up. And again, if you just attended previously, we'd like to know, and that'll help us kind of gear our presentation. Okay, great. Let's see if we get some answers. And I see we got some more attendees. So while we're waiting for answers, I'm just kind of looking. Somebody asked if we have closed caption capability. I do not believe we have that. Sorry, Maria. If you need me to speak louder, let me know. I usually speak quite loud. Okay, how are we doing, Cameron? Are we getting any answers yet? Let's see. Question 1, great. So about evenly split. So a little bit more people have participated before. Welcome back. Thank you very much. And welcome to the folks who are maybe first time attendees. So I think you'll learn a lot, hopefully, on this. And again, if you have any questions, you can answer questions or ask questions along the way using the Q&A button, and we'll answer those as best we can. Okay, so the next question, so my computer advances the slides, is how did you find out about this workshop? And we can pop up the poll on this. Did you learn by a flyer, by email, via the website, or maybe you heard it from a friend or acquaintance, or some other contact? And we'd love to hear how you heard about this, because it helps us conduct better outreach and contact people for future programs and events. So again, did you learn by flyer, email, website, word of mouth, friend or acquaintance, or other? These are just simple questions here. And answers, okay, email, by far the most effective. Okay, good to know. And some in the website, some of the others, and if you want, you can tell us what the other format was. You can use the Q&A and enter in there how you heard about this if it wasn't one of these items. So it wasn't a flyer, it's some by friends. So appreciate it, that's very helpful. Okay, the next slide is, we've had a survey open. I believe we started in April or May. We've had this survey open for a couple of months now. So there's an online survey. It's available both in English and in Spanish. And you can see the QR codes here are on the screen. So if you haven't taken it, take a snapshot or just show that to your camera, and that'll give you a quick link to the survey online. And we really love you to take that. We're going to have some of the results from the survey, but we've had over, I think, 350 plus another 120, so about coming up on 450 to 500 respondents so far, something like that. So we've had really good response, and we really appreciate it. So curious how many of you have taken the survey. About a little over half of you. Great, that's good to know. So if you haven't taken it, we really encourage it, because we ask a lot more questions there that are very helpful to us. And we've also distributed paper surveys as well, and we just got those entered and recorded recently. And so when I get to the survey questions, I'll point that out. So thank you very much, appreciate it. So as promised, our two main targets for tonight's presentation are to talk about the sites inventory. These are all the properties that we have to identify in the housing element and then kind of get those certified and approved by the State Housing Community and Development Department, HCD. And so there's a number of different criteria we have to go through. And what we're trying to do is make sure that we have enough sites that are suitably zoned, have appropriate land use, they don't have too many constraints, and will help us meet what we call our regional housing needs allocation, or RHNA. And so on this slide shows our regional housing needs allocation, or RHNA. And what that is a total number of units that is assigned to every city and every county in the state of California. Everybody gets a number that they have to hit over the next 8 years. And that number is broken down by income levels. And so they're broken down by very low income, moderate income, and above moderate income. So we have a target for each one of those. And you can see that here on this chart. So, and the first column is really the income levels for a 4-person household in this area. So it would, again, very low income is below $80,000 for a 4-person household. Low income would be between 80 and 117. Moderate income would be 117 to 181,000. And above moderate income is more than 181,000. And then if you look at that third column where it says RHNA, those are the targets that we have to hit for each of those income levels. So again, our state assigned goal is 669 very low income units, or units that will be affordable to low income households, i.e. under $82,000. 385 for low income, 200 for moderate income, and 519 for above moderate income. And then the last column, we add a buffer, a 20% buffer. And there's a number of reasons we do that, but the reason is that the city has to maintain at all times over the next 8 years enough sites to meet those numbers. And sometimes those sites get developed and you don't get the full number of sites or units that you want on each site. And if that happens, we have to provide an alternate site or possibly have to rezone to create additional development potential to maintain those levels at all time. So to avoid having to rezone or constantly add new sites, we just add a buffer. And so we increase our targets to 803, 462, 240, and 623 for a total of about 2,128. And it looks like it's getting cut off on the bottom of the screen. I apologize. So the bottom total there, our mandatory requirement is 1,773 units. And then with a 20% buffer, we're looking at 2,100 units. Okay, enough about that. So as I mentioned, to meet those numbers, we need to identify a number of different sites throughout the city that meet those requirements. So we look at the land use. We're making sure our sites that we're looking for are developable and have the right capacity. And so for that, we look to see if they're vacant or if there's already something on the properties, if they've been improved to some extent. We look to see that they have the right size. The state wants to see sites that are between 1/2 acre and 10 acres in size. We look to make sure that they have appropriate infrastructure. So there's water and sewer facilities there. They've got adequate access for roads. Those are the main infrastructure items. And then density. And that really gets to the zoning. So we look at whether these sites are zoned to provide enough units to meet what the state considers are affordable to the various household income levels of very low, moderate, and above moderate. And what the state wants to know is that or what the state assumes is if that we've got dwelling units at densities of 30 dwelling units per acre, that satisfies those lower income household categories. It's assumed that if you meet that density, that we can provide affordable housing. And then the last two categories here, we need to look at the near-term development opportunity. And near-term is really this next 8 years. Is it likely that these sites will be developed over the next 8 years? So we look to see if there's any constraints, and it's particularly relevant if there's any existing use on the property. Sometimes we're redeveloping a site that's already in use for maybe a single family home or some farm or agricultural use, or maybe it's an old commercial property that can be redeveloped for housing. So we look at whether there's any constraints there. One of the things that we look for there in particular that helps us is if we've got property owners that say, hey, sign me up, I'm interested in developing my property. That's really useful. So if you know anybody that has sites that are suitable for high density housing in particular, and they're willing to develop those, particularly over the next 8 years, we'd like to hear from you. And then last is this category, furthering fair housing. And one of the requirements that we have as part of this housing element is to try to make sure that we remove any obstacles to people getting housing. And we want fair access to housing. And we also want kind of an even distribution to the best resources within the city. So generally, we're trying to avoid concentrating new housing, particularly the low and moderate income housing in areas, and trying to provide good mobility throughout the city and frankly throughout the region. And we also are generally looking to locate housing, and particularly lower income housing or affordable housing, close to resources such as employment and education, and again, healthy communities, areas with good clean air and water, and good infrastructure. Okay, so let's see, arena requirements and the site's inventory. So what this table is showing here is, again, the big picture. How do we meet that goal of about 2,128 units? That's our arena plus a 20% buffer. So what this table shows us is how we get there. And so the top row shows how many pending projects we have. So these were recently approved, or they're currently going through the approval process. And we have a lot of units there. So we've got pending projects, about 1,538 projects. Is this right? That seems wrong. And then, so you can see how that's distributed, and we keep track of how those are allocated across those low income or different income levels. So we have 42 that are currently in process for very low. We have 334 lower income units that are coming online very soon, 37 moderate, and then a whole bunch of above moderate, and that's just market rate housing. They don't have any price controls or restrictions at all. So in total, we got about 1,538 in process, and a good number of affordable housing, those lower income and even moderate income units. Then we were able to count what we call ADUs, and these are accessory dwelling units. And these are typically converted garages or new structures in the back or side yard. They can be a unit even within the house. And usually it's a small one-bedroom unit that can be rented out to a very small household, maybe a single person, maybe two people. And we look at the trends for these, and on average, we're projecting that we're going to have over 8 years about 114 of those at the current pace. And for a variety of reasons, we get to count those at these different income levels, which is very good. And it's one way that we can get housing distributed throughout the city, because that doesn't need to be high density multifamily housing. These can occur in single family homes. And so that's one way to kind of get an even distribution throughout the city. And then we look at our site capacity of proposed sites. And on the next slide, I'm going to show you both the existing pending projects and proposed sites. So here we've got about 1,000 units, and we kind of do our math on these things. We kind of make projections and can kind of calculate how many units we're going to get there. And in this case, we're only looking at the lower and moderate income units here because we have enough above moderate units already. We don't need any more. So this next to last row here, total capacity, shows the combination of our pending projects, our projected 8 accessory dwelling unit, and then what we're proposing as new sites to meet the state requirements. And that shows that we're able to meet or exceed our RHNA plus buffer on this bottom row in tan. And then the bottom row shows how we are in terms of that total count, surplus or deficit. So we've got 20% or more buffer for all categories and incomes. Okay, so here's our map. And so this is the city in the light gray, city of Gilroy. And all the colors on there are our sites. And so in general, our approach here is to use the existing, we have a new general plan for the city that was just adopted at the end of 2020. And so it's already laid out the long-term plan for the next 20 or so years in terms of how the city wants to develop. So wherever we can, we try to go with the plan and go with the zoning that implements that plan. And fortunately, we're able to do that here in Gilroy. Based on our current table, which showed that we can meet our goals plus the 20% buffer, we don't need to rezone any lands, which is great because that can, just kind of let people, get people excited generally. The other thing that we do is we try to use all of our recent pending projects, as I mentioned on that prior slide. We use the accessory dwelling units, as I mentioned. And then where we have to get new sites to supplement all those pending projects and accessory dwelling units, we try to go to the best sites available. And by best, we mean the easiest ones to develop and develop in accordance with the zoning. So we look for vacant or largely underutilized sites. Maybe there's some improvements on there like a parking lot or a small building, but it's a big site that has, a good amount of development potential. And we have a good number of those in Gilroy, which is great. Kind of another special category is the train station. Gilroy is very fortunate to have a very good train station, or a train station, and a good one at that. And there's good land around the train station on both sides of the tracks that are available for development. And so we're including those sites because those are perfect for anybody that needs to commute any distance. Housing on and immediately near or within walking distance, ideally, of a train station is a high priority. So we've got that. And then, as I mentioned before, we're looking for sites that turn to be naturally affordable because they have good access to transit. You don't necessarily need a car. You don't need as many cars, or you don't need to drive as much. You have good access to services. And that can be, good food and restaurants and dining, professional care and services, your doctor, all sorts of services there. And then access to employment. And again, transit goes with that as well. So on this map, and this is kind of our overall map, and then we've got some zoomed in ones. We're showing sites here. Here's the train station, these large purple spots. And generally we've color coded these so that the brighter purple colors are the lower income sites, the moderate and lower income. And then the moderate and above moderate sites, which are lower density, single family homes, and maybe some low density townhouses and apartments or duplexes. Those will be shown in kind of the green colors. And so the higher density things will be showing those purples, the dark purple being the highest density sites. And then the main difference is the pending sites are shown with a black outline around them. And the new sites don't have that black outline. So I'll go to the next slide, and that hopefully will be a little more clear. So click in. So this is the area that we're just kind of calling, downtown north. Whoops, did I go too far? I did, sorry. So you can see on the left side of the slide, the area that we're zooming in on. And then on the right is the zoomed in. So hopefully that's legible. And this is kind of the Monterey corridor, the north end of it. So you can see all the sites in here. And most of these sites don't have that black outline. The ones that do are current, pending, or recently approved projects. So you see one up, that kind of big rectangular one in the upper section there. It's kind of purple. So that's a moderate income site that's pending or recently approved. As you come down, there's a kind of a long green one with a black outline. That's another site that's recently approved. And then all those other purple ones, kind of on both sides of Monterey, are proposed sites. And again, these are sites that were vacant or underutilized, but also have the high density zoning that we're looking for. Okay. So this is kind of the same area, just moving south. And you see the 2 or 3 biggest parcels here near the top, the dark purple. Those are the train station sites on both sides of the tracks. You see the tracks kind of splitting right through the middle there. And so on the left side, I know the Valley Transit Authority had a proposal about a year ago to do a mix of affordable and market rate housing and build a plaza, restore and preserve the historic train station, create some amenities and even some stores and shops and things. And then on the right side, those big parcels there are proposed to be developed with a high-speed rail when that comes through. So there's going to be a number of improvements over there, including parking for the whole area. And that would be parking for the development on the west side, as well as commuter parking, park and ride. And again, you can see the other sites that are proposed here that meet our requirements. So these are generally sites that are between 1/2 acre and 10 acres. You really don't have many 10-acre sites, but also have the high density zoning to meet our requirements. And then you can see down that kind of lower left-hand corner is a little kind of, looks like a green hand with a bunch of little fingers. And that's some recently approved single family or low density housing. Okay, moving along, then we've got another one. This is kind of the western or central section of the city. And you see a lot of recently approved projects here. So almost all of these have that black outline. And you've got a mix of lower density single family. There's a kind of that large triangular one and kind of the kind of army green or olive green. That one's got a mix of income levels on that property. And then you got some purple ones up near the intersection on Santa Teresa and also First Avenue. Or was it First Street? Sorry, Street. And so again, good cluster of sites throughout the town. That's very good. All right. So with that, we'll take a little break and answer some of your questions. It looks like some have been answered already. We've got a few open ones. And let's see. We just shut out a developer at the train station because of parking. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Any project needs to come in, needs to meet the parking requirements. And we have 2 kinds of parking requirements at the train station. Parking for the commuters that are coming and they need to park and ride. So they're coming through areas out of town where they need to drive to the station. And that's very important. And then any development that's there will also have a certain parking demand. And there may be some sharing there. So I know that was an issue. But I think it's more about making the right adjustments to the proposal to find the right balance. So hopefully that doesn't kill the project. It's just a matter of adjusting it because it's a very good project and important. So hopefully that helps there. All but a few lower income sites are in areas designated by the state as low resource. How will you meet the requirements to affirmatively further fair housing? Excellent question. So we can't always have perfect distribution. We try, and that's why we like to see, and if I go back just to kind of show the map, it will help You can kind of see the broader, get the overall town map here, city map. There we go. So you can kind of see all the sites. So the higher density ones do fall within more of that Monterey corridor. And that's largely because that's where the higher density housing always has been. It follows the train station, it follows where the services are. That was the core where the city built. And so that's a typical pattern. You have your highest density around your transit, your employment, and all your resources. And so that's part of the land use pattern. The question is, how do we, affirmatively further fair housing? And it's going to be a combination of things. So the city is fortunate to have a downtown specific plan and a new general plan, which speaks to making a number of improvements throughout. So we can look for more housing choice and mobility throughout the town. So there's different programs and techniques to do that. And we'll get to some of those programs in the second half. And but some of those are Section 8 housing choice vouchers, making sure those are available, making sure that tenants and landlords understand their rights, particularly with respect to new case law that requires that landlords have to accept vouchers as any other income. They can't discriminate on that. So that's good. And then we're looking for place-based improvements to make areas better. So we try to look for equity throughout the town to make sure everybody's getting access to parks and healthy food and clean air and utilities and services. So it's a complicated answer to a very good question. And let's see. Next question we have is, let's see. Oh, this is a related one. VTA withdrew their RFP for the Gilroy rail sites. Has VTA communicated with the city? I don't know if there's been anything recent there. Maybe Cindy could answer that. But I think it's definitely, one of these things that's likely to happen. It's a good idea. VTA and most transit services are either promoting housing and development on their sites or adjacent to their sites, because that's just excellent planning. Those are the best planning practices. I don't know if there's been any recent communications on that. So I think I made a mistake. Type answer. Okay. Next question, and thanks for asking these. They're coming in as we speak. These maps appear very segregated. All the low and affordable is on one side and moderate on the other. What can we do to spread out the demographics? Okay, so good point. That's the same point, really. Again, we're trying to follow the existing zoning and general plan, and we do have enough lands that are currently zoned for that. And we've got a lot of new projects that are built more in the central and western portions, but those areas are also constrained as you get further out. We've got kind of established patterns already of single family homes. Those tend to be the newer areas, so they're not likely to change. Older single family areas that may be closer to downtown are available. We've tried to find some sites there where we can. One was an example of kind of toward the north end that we're looking at where there's a firehouse, as that might be a good opportunity to build housing for the firemen, the firefighters. Other opportunities are accessory dwelling units. It's a good way to distribute these into areas that are recently developed with single family homes. We can get additional units in those areas, and that helps provide more distribution. And I'm forgetting about an important one, I know. Let's see. Oh, inclusionary housing. So the city is also, when I get to programs, one of the key programs there is to create an inclusionary housing program. And so new developments would be required of certain size, typically 5 or 10 units or more are required to provide a certain percentage, typically about 15%. That would be lower and moderate income. And so that's something that the city has expressed interest in. and that's right now one of our draft programs. So as new development comes online, we call that inclusionary because you would have multiple income households being able to afford to live in that particular development. If the development doesn't provide that housing, then they would be required to pay an in lieu of fee, and those fees would be used to build housing in other areas in a similar location. So hopefully that helps answer that. Let's see, does your map available sites show portions of land that are not currently in the city? Right now we don't. So it's a good question, Richard. You asked the question, are there other areas? So the city is growing. There are areas that are within the urban service area and designated for future expansion of the city boundaries or annexation. But right now we're not looking at those. We're trying to stay within the city proper because that's what we see is likely over the next 8 years, and it's really the requirement under the state law. If we do include other lands that aren't part of the city right now, those lands also come with a RHNA. And so that would just increase our RHNA to go with those lands. And it just provides a little extra challenge there. So again, we're trying to meet all the needs within the city proper. Hopefully that helps there. The train does not provide robust service, nor has it for years now. I believe that these policies are outdated. Well, one of the advantages, it's kind of a chicken or the egg. Buses and transit tend to follow where the demand is. So one of the advantages of building in and around your train station and your transit lines is that it provides more customers typically, and you get a higher ridership. And with higher ridership, you get higher frequency and better service. So you kind of build a virtuous cycle. And without that, it's just hard to attract people, right? And it kind of really depends on who just has to get on that train and get to work. So over time, we try to encourage and create a great environment around the train station to live, to work, to play, to do business, and recreate, and also commute. So hopefully with future investments in the transit service and development around it, these work together to make it to provide better service over the long haul. But that's not something that the city has direct control over anyway. There's no enforcement on this new policy, especially not in Gilroy. Landlords and property management companies flat out refuse to take vouchers. If that's the case, they should be reported. That has been until very recently, landlords were able to do that. And they would, proudly say, vouchers not accepted. But the law changed recently. So that's one of the programs, is to make sure that landlords understand that they can't do that anymore, either explicitly or implicitly. So if they get caught doing that, there are very significant fines and penalties to do that, because that really, eliminates the whole purpose of these vouchers. The vouchers are to allow people to find a home that they want to live in. They don't have to be limited to one particular area. And so they use that voucher to kind of bridge the gap to housing that they want to live in, or maybe a different area as well. So enforcement is going to be really important on that. And part of it will start with education of both tenants and landlords to make sure everybody understands the rights and responsibilities. Okay, let's see. The next one, we got lots of questions. This is great. We'll take a few more, and then we're going to probably move to some programs soon, because some of these questions are definitely getting into the program section. The next question here is there any way to plan housing for Gavilan College students? Good question. We're looking for housing that's affordable to all types of households and income levels. So that's one thing we try to do, is typically students are looking for housing that are smaller, or they can pair up in groups. And again, lower income. And So that's a great program. If that's something we can do, we would definitely encourage that. Appreciate it. Let's see. All but a few lower income sites are in areas designated by the state as low resource. How will you meet the requirements to affirmatively further fair housing? I feel like that's the question we had earlier. Yeah, there are a lot, and the city does have some pretty significant differences in terms of concentrations of poverty and ethnicity. And so we are looking for that distribution. And so it's kind of a two-pronged approach. One is to try to provide greater distribution. And we talked about the different programs to do that, including inclusionary housing, the use of vouchers, including enforcement, education, and then also making improvements to make those areas better. And again, that's where the general plan comes in and the downtown specific plan comes in. And I know that the city is looking to update the downtown specific plan as well. So there'll be an opportunity there to incorporate some of these housing element programs and really kind of further implement them in a greater level of detail. Let's see, hopefully that helps answer that. Will the western side of the city have a variety of housing, condos, market rate apartments, additional single family? Something to consider is changing demographic needs, smaller family size, for example, families with no children, and the desire to downsize in retirement years. Yeah, good point. And again, as I mentioned, we're looking to meet housing needs, and housing needs is of everybody. So that's all different types of families, different sizes of families, empty nesters, seniors, young families, large families, students, and that results in a need for a variety of different housing types. Now, the good thing in Gilroy is Gilroy has a good range of zoning to meet a full range of housing types. So we are looking at programs to encourage and promote greater distribution. Like I say, right now, we're able to meet the RHNA requirements and meet what we think are the housing needs using our existing zoning and without rezoning anything. There could be incentives that we've looked at. We'd like to see more out, and we did look for more sites out on that First Street corridor because that is generally rated as higher resource or higher opportunity than the downtown area. And as you can see, a lot on St. Teresa or Santa Teresa is a lot of new development there. And so that's kind of spoken for already. That's not likely to change. But any new development in and around that area would likely also be subject to the inclusionary housing. And again, there could be other ways to maybe bump up the densities even on those, particularly like those mixed use areas or the areas near First Street where you can have some good higher density is planned already. So that's one way to help there. Let's see, the last one we have right now, probably a program question. Special need housing. Can survivors of gender-based violence be considered under this category? Yes, basically any protected class falls under special housing needs. And so we're looking to provide opportunities for all types. So hopefully that helps. And let's see. Do you have data to share on current income breakdown for Gilroy residents? We do. There's a whole needs section. That's one of the first major sections of the housing element. And we've drafted that internally. We're putting together the public review draft. And we're hopefully going to have that out in July for public review. That will be out for 30 days for public review. And then it will also go to HCD for a 90-day review. Hopefully they'll do it quicker, but typically they're going to take 90 days. So we're going to have a 120-day period plus a few extra weeks where this will be available for public review. But there's a whole needs chapter in there that goes in great detail about all the demographics and socioeconomic data for the city of Gilroy and the larger region. So you can kind of see it in comparison. And so that's coming very soon. Good question. Let's see. So I think that's our questions for now. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the next section, which we've already kind of gotten into. And I will get through our programs. Appreciate your questions. It's a really good group here, asking good questions. Okay, so plan and programs. So all of this, and I mentioned at the beginning, so for some of the newcomers who haven't been to any of these earlier workshops, I would encourage you to look online to the city's website, and there's a site for the housing element update. And on there are recordings of the prior workshops. And this one will be recorded and posted there as well, probably within a day or two. And that prior workshop went into greater detail about all the components of the housing element. But I'll just quickly note that there's 6 major chapters generally. And that starts with the needs analysis. And again, it's all that demographics, socioeconomic data, lots of tables and charts that kind of really digest Gilroy and Gilroy's housing needs based on who lives in Gilroy. Then we've got a chapter on constraints, and we look at governmental and non-governmental constraints. So particularly zoning is a major potential constraint. Our regulations can be a constraint. They can also be an incentive. And so we look to see if there's ways that we can improve the regulations to remove any barriers, significant barriers to housing development. And as we noted before, there's actually, Gilroy's been doing quite well. So the barriers aren't really that significant in our opinion so far. Then we look at a couple of other things, with sites, which we just talked about. We look at past programs and performance, also known as the review and revise. So we take the old programs, review them, see what worked, see how we can make them better, and revise them and come up with new programs. And that's part of what we're talking about here. So the programs is a major component. And then there's a whole chapter now on affirmatively furthering fair housing. That used to be kind of, a couple of paragraphs, but as part of this 6th cycle housing element, that gets its whole special chapter and gets a lot of attention. So that's got a lot of its own kind of demographic spin on things. And as some of our questioners and attendees have noted, looks at things like opportunity, mobility, access to jobs, education, to economic opportunity, looks at healthy environments, and so a number of different kind of slices to look at how fair housing is or is not provided. And one of the big efforts there is to try to correct past discriminatory and segregationist actions or patterns that have occurred either intentionally or unintentionally. So hopefully that helps. So on with programs. And as I mentioned here, it's one of the main components of the housing element. So with sites and programs, you've got the kind of, two key pieces of the housing element. And so as I mentioned, our housing plan is comprised of 3 main components: our goals, to the broad objectives and desires and outcomes, our policies, which are general commitments, strategies, and approaches to how we might get there, and then programs and actions. And that's really what we've been talking about. What are the specific things that the city in particular can do to improve housing in Gilroy? And again, as part of this cycle, there's much greater emphasis on putting measurable outcomes, metrics, numbers, specific timelines, identifying specific parties, even funding, to make sure that we have a very good plan and a very good chance of achieving these goals. So that's just in general what we're doing. Here are the 6 existing housing goals, and these are very solid. So provide adequate residential sites to accommodate projected housing needs. That's meeting our RHNA and our general growth objectives. Number 2 is encourage and support provision of affordable housing. And again, there's number of different tools to do that. Maintain and conserve your existing housing stock, particularly affordable housing. Make sure it's safe and sound and sanitary. So sometimes we've got situations where housing isn't well maintained, might have overcrowding, is in need of repairs. So we want to, make sure that we've got programs and methods to keep any housing we have, one, affordable and safe and healthy. Then number 4 is increase access to decent and suitable housing for Gilroy residents with special housing needs. We talked about that earlier, had a few questions. And then number 5 is really that fair housing. Ensure equal housing opportunities for all residents, regardless of race, color, religion, sex, sexual orientation, marital status, national origin, ancestry, any other status, frankly. So all people is really what we're going for. And then last but not least is the increased awareness of and participation in housing programs. So that's kind of the education, engagement component, somewhat what we're doing tonight. With better understanding and then information, hopefully we make better decisions. And that's both at the tenant level, the city level, landlord level, and other agencies, including community-based organizations. Okay, so the next few slides, these are just some of the results, and I will qualify this. So far, we've got 300 English responses. We had surveys both in English and Spanish. So we've got 312 responses through the English survey. Those are almost all online. The Spanish responses, we've got 129 so far. Most of those came in later, and we just got those, started to tabulate those, because most of those came in on paper. So we got those a little bit later, and then we had to get those entered into the data. So we're just kind of crunching these numbers. So I'm going to qualify these slides, because these slides really represent what we had before we just got all the paper surveys in. So these don't reflect English and Spanish. And I can kind of point out some of the differences. But we asked a few key questions. We asked about 25 questions. So I've got just 3 here. What are the housing issues, really in Gilroy? What are the big ones? So at the top of the list here are, and this is both English and Spanish, difficulty paying rent. That's the second column or first column from the left. And then homelessness, those ranked high on both. And you see all the other categories in here: ADA accessibility, housing segregation, discrimination, access to commute times, that actually was pretty high. I'll note an overcrowding, that was much higher in the Spanish surveys that just came in. So eventually we're going to post these, and this will be available on the website as well. You can see the full surveys and all the responses to all 25 questions in both English and Spanish and combined. So again, I just qualify, we just got all that material in, and we haven't had a chance to make all the charts yet. So, and we expect more actually coming in. So hopefully we'll get even more responses in Spanish. So the next one, top 3 groups with the greatest housing needs. And so again, kind of right in the middle, extremely low income persons, no surprise. Off to the far right is persons experiencing homelessness or unsheltered. And then we see middle income, workforce housing, low income persons, and also seniors. Those, again, from a quick glance, did change. And when we look at the Spanish responses, some of those weightings and responses look a little different. You see, I think, and we looked at the demographics as well. The families that responded to the paper surveys in Spanish tend to be a little bit younger, but had larger households. So they were looking for household size was more of an issue. So the right kind of housing was a different issue there. You see students didn't rank very high. I don't remember students ranking highly on the Spanish response surveys either. But still, 5% are saying, hey, that's an issue. So even though it's low on the bar charts, doesn't mean it's not significant. And we want to be aware of those things. So this last one here is housing types. What are the most appropriate housing types? What do we need? And these, as I mentioned before, did vary when you look at the different surveys in English and Spanish. So again, on this one, the main ones here in the 40% are the low-income workforce, middle income, and affordable housing. Those were kind of the top 3. Close behind those in 4th and 5th were transitional and supportive housing, and housing for homelessness. So makes sense. Basically, the people with the greatest needs are the lower income households, kind of from low, medium, and moderate. But we did see where on this chart, we see 12% for units for one individual or small households. I'm sorry, for larger extended families. That bar was much higher in the Spanish surveys that just came in. So I look forward to being able to present those to you when this comes out in our draft housing element. We should have these in the draft that you're going to see, and hopefully in July, in a couple of weeks. So with that, we want to talk about the housing goals here, and we're going to this is kind of shorthand, but again, there's 6 or 7 main ones, so we modified these a little bit. One is encourage new and affordable housing production. So we kind of combine 2 existing goals from the current housing element. Remove constraints in development. That's kind of the new one here. So there's just a specific target on constraints. Number 3 is preserve and improve existing housing. That's what we talked about. Keep the housing you've got, keep it in good shape. And particularly where we've got below market rate housing, those are often below market rate for a period of time. And some of the oldest ones were for 35 years. And then we see them for 55 years reserved to be below market rate. The current trend is 99 years. As they come up on those expiration dates, we call those at risk, and we look to have those renewed and continued as affordable housing. So that's really what that number 3 is all about. Number 4, provide a housing assistance. That can be low-income loans, it can be education, again, can be mediation between landlords and tenants. So all sorts, there's all different types there, and there's different programs. So I'm going to go through and hit some of the typical programs for each of these. Number 5 is accommodate households with special needs. Number 6, affirmatively furthering fair housing. And then again, a whole category on education, outreach, and awareness. So I'm going to take a drink of water here. So this is our first group of programs. Great. So these are just typical things that we're doing, and some are very specific to Gilroy. So as I mentioned, inclusionary housing, require affordable units in new housing projects. Excuse me. ADU promotion and monitoring. So again, ADUs are a good way to get units distributed in all types of housing, but particularly in the lower density, higher resource, higher opportunity areas that were being questioned here. The production levels in Gilroy for ADUs have not been that great, but a lot of communities have been doing really well with that. And there's a number of different ways we can help promote, facilitate ADU production. It's a really good way to support the existing household and provide housing for low-income households and small households that might not otherwise be met. And it's also a good way to provide housing for students, by the way. Density bonuses. There's a density bonus program required by the state, and the state and Gilroy is interested and has expressed some interest in maybe going beyond the state minimums. So generally what that would mean is providing greater bonuses for providing affordable housing. So currently you can, depending on the number and percentage of units and the income levels that you provide, you can earn up to a 50% increase in your permitted density. So there's some other ways we could get there faster. We could go even higher. So that's something that we're looking at. Buy rate approval for duplexes, triplexes, or triplexes and quadplexes. That's another good way to provide more housing and kind of distributed housing, and kind of fitting in with some of those areas that are maybe already developed or developing in a lower density pattern. These are the types of housing that can blend right in and again, provide some more opportunity there. The city's also noted that they're interested in allowing for micro units. And again, good student housing, empty nester housing. The real idea is that, you you can make it more affordable by having a smaller unit. You've got smaller materials, it's less to maintain, it's less costly to build, you get more density, so it reduces the land cost per unit. A lot of advantages to micro units. And micro units, generally anything under 500 square feet for a one bedroom unit. And I've seen them as small as 200 square feet. So size of a small hotel room, basically. And the general idea is all your amenities and things are part of the complex, they're shared in common and being part of the community. And then by right approval on reused RHNA sites. So there are a number of sites that if they're used in prior housing elements, they kind of get priority. And what the state has said is that if a developer comes in on one of those sites and builds 20% of those units as lower or affordable to lower income households, then the city is required to approve that by right. So it doesn't have to get a public hearing. There's no discretion. If they meet the zoning requirements, then they get approval. So doesn't mean there's no requirements. It just means if they meet the standards, you go straight to getting your building permit and can start construction. And that can save 15, 20% sometimes on the overall per unit cost. So those are housing production programs. Let's see. So we got a couple other categories. Constraint removal programs. So one is, it's already basically held in abeyance. It's not being enforced. The city had a residential development ordinance, which was a growth management ordinance. And the state says we can't do that, at least while we're in the current housing crisis. So we can't put a limit on annual growth of housing. So right now the plan is to try to build our way out of it rather than to meter it out. So that RDO or residential development ordinance will be repealed. There are some good aspects of that are going to be retained, including provisions for inclusionary housing. And the idea is to, rather than have that limited to certain areas, which were really like new developments, new annexed lands and planned developments, that it could be available throughout the city. One of the options is to increase zoning densities. So the general plan that was just adopted, I mentioned, is allowed for increased density. The zoning implements that general plan. The zoning in several of those zones needs to be increased to meet the potential that's allowed in the general plan. So that's underway, actually. The city is currently working on their comprehensive zoning update. Then we look at fees and development standards and all the plans, and making sure that all of that is very transparent. It's online, has to be readily available. And so people don't have to go hunting to find this information. And so we want to make it easy to do the right thing and to comply with the city's plans and ordinances. As I mentioned, the comprehensive zone update is currently underway, and that will, one, make sure that it implements the new general plan. So again, as we talked about, increasing those densities for some of those zones consistent with the general plan. And then objective development standards. That's a big one. A lot of old codes have a lot of subjective language. Things need to be compatible and similar and in the same character. Those are all very difficult terms to judge. So state now requires us to provide objective standards. And the definition of objective is that any person can kind of quickly determine yes or no, does this meet the requirement? It doesn't require any special education about the issue. It should be, 1 + 1 = 2. Great. You've satisfied that requirement and you can move on. So we're looking to replace subjective standards with objective standards that are easier to comply with and enforce. And then permit streamlining. Can we improve the process? Can we speed it up? Maybe reducing fees in some cases. Some cases might provide incentives to facilitate certain projects. Sometimes some communities will put projects with affordable housing to the top of the line. If there's a backlog of projects to get reviewed, those get priority and they get processed first. So I've seen that happen, just as an example. Okay, next one is housing preservation programs. Again, try to preserve our below market rate housing. So when they become at risk or they're starting to expire, work with the property owners to get them to re-up and keep them as affordable. Continue housing rehabilitation programs. So again, keeping those houses in good shape so we don't lose them, and that they're being actively used and in good production. And then again, displacement prevention. Sometimes housing gets converted into condominium ownership, from a rental apartment to condominium ownership. And so we give tenants rights, basically. So they get an option to purchase. They get the first right to return if they have to be relocated while the facilities are typically upgraded. And then if they don't come back, they're not going to come back or buy, there's some assistance, there's fair warning, and sometimes assistance to relocate them, find them housing so they don't become homeless or otherwise housing stressed and burdened. Okay, housing assistance programs. The city has a housing trust fund that's managed, and there's a group, and I'm drawing a blank on the name, but they help manage all the below market rate housing and do a good job at that. There's different funding sources to assist housing homeownership. Those can be low interest loans, can be technical assistance and guidance, just to help people make the applications, make a good application, make sure that they're not suffering from any sort of discriminatory practices. We talked about the Section 8 referrals. There's often long waiting lines for those Section 8 vouchers. And so when those become available, we make sure they're available. And they may not just be in Gilroy, it could be in surrounding communities. So when they're available, we try to let people know so they can take advantage of it and get on the next waiting list. And then, as I mentioned, landlord-tenant mediation, and that includes education as well. And as we talked about earlier, making sure that particularly the landlords know that they have to, by law, accept vouchers as any other income. They can't discriminate with somebody with a Section 8 housing choice voucher. Okay, special housing needs programs. We talked about a number of different things. Zoning for micro units that can meet a whole bunch of needs. Farm worker housing, that was one that did come up very highly in the surveys that just came in. We saw that as one of the top priorities. And as well as incentives for seniors and larger households. And then also extremely low income households are considered special needs. And so we have programs that will be called out specifically in the housing element for that. And then there's some that are required by new state law and legislation. And these are past requirements, but they kind of continually update. So there's some new requirements that we need to amend the code to reflect, and that affects emergency shelters, low barrier navigation centers, and then a fairly new one is also providing priority water and sewer service for affordable housing projects. So we work with the service providers to make sure that in a pinch that in any new development that, again, they would get priority for affordable housing. Okay, and then fair housing programs. We've got the Project Sentinel is the current fair housing service provider. And so whether we continue with them or somebody similar, that's a really important service that the city contracts for. And that's important to maintain and continue. Fair housing education and counseling. Again, awareness, education are really important to make good decisions. If you know your rights and responsibilities, we'll have better results. Similar to that is the tenant landlord education mediation that we've talked about. And as I mentioned, also the housing choice voucher, the new case law that says you can't discriminate based on those vouchers. So source of income protection, that's part of that, what I mentioned before. And then as we talked about before, the other aspect is if we've got an area of concentration, we want to make sure that area has got the same benefits and amenities. That can be, improved streets, curbs, sidewalks, street trees, lighting, access to healthy foods, access to, transit services, et cetera. Those can all fall under place-based improvements. So generally targeting maybe communities that haven't had the same benefits as a lot of the newer developments. And that's typical patterns. You've got older areas, maybe some of those trees have died, maybe they never had the improvements to begin with. And in comparison to the new developments that have come in, they've got really nice sidewalks and street trees and water and sewer and all the benefits. So we're looking to provide some equity there. And then outreach and education programs. I think I've said this before, but a key component of that is making sure that we've got clear, accessible information in multiple languages. It's on the websites, pamphlets, newsletters. It's readily available in all sorts of varieties. We can work with special events at community booths, make sure we get the word out. Again, workshops like tonight is a good way to communicate. Then we can focus on specific areas or groups. And a good way to do that is through community-based organizations, working with the churches and the schools and different organizations that people trust to provide information. And so we try to hit all of those prongs. It's one of the reasons we asked you how you found out about tonight's workshop. So with that, I'm going to take a sip of water and we'll answer some of your questions. Appreciate it. We've got a couple of open ones. So I'll read that. I'm just going to take a sip. So I think the question that's on here, we answered about a half an hour ago, I think. This is special housing needs. Can survivors of gender-based violence be considered under this category of special housing needs? I believe so. And that would be a protected class, and we're looking for housing that would meet their needs. So if you've got any particular issues or suggestions, please let us know. You can use the Q&A box, or you can contact through the website. You can provide comments and suggestions there. And I will note that at the end of the survey, and I believe also on the website, you can sign up for more information in future announcements. We answered this one too. Do you have a share of current income breakdown? I don't have it tonight, I'm sorry. But that is in the draft housing element, which will be coming out in about 3 weeks. And let's see, council has previously approved safe parking site, but to my knowledge, one has never been opened. Is this incorporated in the housing element programs? I don't believe it's in our draft right now, but it's a really good suggestion. That's a tool that a lot of cities are using or considering using to help meet some of the unsheltered needs. And I guess in a way you do have shelter, you've got a car. So it's for people who are generally living out of their cars, hopefully in the short term, while they're trying to find more permanent housing. And so that is to allocate or identify areas where they can park overnight and be safe and have some access to some other services. So great. Any other questions? I know we asked a lot of questions during our sites presentation. So, oh, new one, great, thank you. Will year-round emergency shelter be proposed? That's a good question. We definitely have provisions to allow for shelters. Those are usually coordinated with other agencies, including the county, to make sure that they're going, because they're expensive, they're difficult to operate, so they need to be located carefully. And so there's a lot that goes into that. I don't know if one will be located in Gilroy. That's not exclusively a Gilroy decision, but they would be allowed. And that's part of our job, is to make sure that the zoning allows that and in accordance with the state legislation. Okay, new questions coming in, thank you. Community members have also requested that an ongoing multi-year source of funding for basic needs services for homeless residents be identified, rather than requiring providers to reapply each year. Will this be incorporated into the housing element? That sounds like a really good suggestion. So again, trying to find ways to ease the process, streamline the process. That sounds very good. So thank you, Allison. Let's see, Rebecca, I'm sorry if I missed it. Will inclusionary housing ordinance be prioritized? That is one of the top priorities. The City Council adopted a housing policy document with a variety of things. I believe that was last October. And that was one of the top priorities right there, is to include that. So thank you, Rebecca. And let's see, why hasn't the City of Gilroy been aggressive in getting transitional housing in place, safe parking, etc.? I can't answer that myself, but we appreciate the comment. And again, transitional housing is one of those things that is required to be allowed. It is allowed currently in Gilroy. I believe we do have some amendments to comply that are necessary to comply with the recent state housing law. They're relatively minor, so it's not something that's been preventing it. It's just something that there's some minor adjustments that need to be made to meet some of the more logistical aspects of it. But if you want the city to be more aggressive about it and you've got some suggestions, that's a good idea. And the safe parking we talked about, so thank you. Let's see. So I was just going to take a breath and then another question pops up. That's great. It's wonderful to see farm worker housing on the list. A big thank you to staff and consultant. Great work. Well, thank you. Yeah, and that was, as I mentioned, in the recent batch of paper surveys, that was a high priority. So again, when we get to report that out more completely, you'll see that. And so we appreciate that. And obviously, we have a good agricultural community here, which means we have farm workers, and means we have farm worker needs and housing needs. So that's great. Appreciate that. Okay, well, good. A lot of really good questions, you guys. Appreciate the interest and sticking around. This is kind of a special focus topic, and not everybody's housing experts are interested in it. So I really appreciate the interest and the very good questions. So hopefully we've done an adequate job of answering your questions. And again, we do record these. This will be posted and available later. These recordings are really helpful to us because we can go back and listen to these again. We can see your comments in writing. But I will take this opportunity to encourage you to, if you haven't done so, take the survey. If you have taken the survey, maybe encourage somebody you know to take the survey. Let's see here. So just want to kind of close out a little bit here with our project schedule. So our last workshop, I believe, was March 30th. It seems like it wasn't that long ago. Tonight, obviously, is June 28th. That's our second community workshop. We may have a joint or city council study session. That's to be determined. That is really to kind of specifically to help the city council. So it'll be a lot of the same information here, but geared specifically for them. And then again, we hope to have, it says August for the public review draft. We're trying to shoot for the end of July. We'd like to get that out as soon as possible. As I mentioned, that will be out for 30-day public review minimum, and then followed by a 90-day review by HCD, the State Housing and Community Development Department. And so with that, we'll be back from HCD. If we get this out in August, we'll be back around December with their comments, and then we'll probably make another round of revisions. That'll also go out for public review again, so probably around January. There will be revisions and response to comments, and then hopefully we can adopt this relatively soon after that. The online survey, we've said that we would keep it open through this drafting process. So the idea was that when that public review draft comes out, we kind of close the online survey and just have people comment on the official housing element. So that's the current plan. It's possible we could keep it open longer, but typically the kind of response rates taper off. However, we've been getting good response rates, so we're definitely going to keep it open until that public review draft goes out. So with that, again, here's our link to those online surveys. So if you hold your camera up over the image, the top one is in English, the middle one is in Spanish. The bottom one on the right takes you to the website where you can also get all the other materials that are posted and will be posted. And you can also get to those online surveys in that regard. If you've got any questions or comments, you can contact Cindy, and her information is there on this slide, email or phone. If you want to speak to somebody in Spanish, you can contact Miguel Contreras. His email and phone number is here as well. Or again, you can submit comments directly on the website. And yeah, lots of ways to contact and participate. So really appreciate your interest and your longevity and sticking with us through this long discussion. Let's see. So there was a question. How long did you say the surveys would be available online? At least till August. So the plan was to end the survey once we put the public review draft of the housing element out. It's possible we could extend that if we're still getting good responses and good response rates. We may keep that open a little longer, but at least till August. I think that's a safe period. So, okay, that's good. Oh, okay, you got your answer there, great. Let's see, and then thank you. Well, great, thank you, Maria. It's our pleasure to help you with this. So with that, I think we'll wait and see if there's any other questions or comments. Again, you can submit, take it on the survey. There's plenty of opportunities in the survey for open comments as well. It's a good way to kind of expand on any particular topic. Yeah, lots of ways to participate. So appreciate your interest tonight. And I think with that, we'll let you go and have some dinner. So again, thank you for letting us come into your homes. Thank you for sharing your interest and your excellent questions. And we'll see you soon. Thank you very much.